in Russia, fallout from the decidedly undiplomatic treatment of a senior Dutch diplomat named Onno Elderenbosch, who was attacked and beaten in his Moscow apartment yesterday by two intruders. They left behind a heart drawn on his mirror in lipstick with the initials LGBT, or lesbian, gay, bisexual and transgender. And just last week, Dutch police arrested a Russian diplomat in The Hague. They released him several hours later and apologized to Moscow. So these are just the latest in a series of incidents between the two countries and the latest in Russia's anti-gay law controversy. Last spring, on a visit to Amsterdam, President Vladimir Putin was none too pleased to be met by a parade of pro-gay protesters. International pressure on Russia to overturn the law will surely increase as February's Winter Olympics in Sochi approach. And what about the case of 30 Greenpeace environmental activists who've been jailed and charged with piracy, which carries a sentence of 15 years behind bars in Russia? Their Dutch-flagged ship was boarded off the Russian Arctic coast last month. My guest tonight from Moscow is journalist Masha Gessen. She's writing about all these crackdowns, and she's also personally impacted by the anti-gay propaganda law because as a gay parent, she is raising her children in Russia. Masha Gessen, thank you for joining me. Let me first ask you, and have to say that we have a bit of a satellite delay, let me first ask you about what seems to be going on between Russia and the Netherlands. Is this just a tit-for-tat diplomatic spat, or is there a gay element thrown in?
It's everything. But, you know, the thing is that Putin has been running the country like a thug for 14 years, and he's really just showing that face to the world. What happened between the Netherlands and Moscow in the incident with the diplomat could have happened with any other country. It's not specific to the Dutch-Russian relationship, but it is specific to the way Russia is treating the rest of the world. The Russian diplomat in Amsterdam was detained on suspicion of domestic violence. He was apparently seen by neighbors beating his children. And then 2 days later, a Dutch diplomat is beaten up. The Dutch are saying that there is no way that a random assailant would have known where this diplomat lived, or would have known enough to leave the initials LGBT on the mirror. This was a high-level diplomatic message of sorts.
But why is Russia doing that? Why is the government doing that against this diplomat?
Russia is showing the rest of the world what it thinks of it. It thinks nothing of detaining 30 people, most of whom are not Russian citizens, one of whom is actually a working journalist, on this incredible charge of piracy, even though the ship they were on was in international waters, and essentially they're facing jail sentences of up to 15 years for peaceful protests. They were protesting oil and gas drilling in the Arctic. And the message to the world is basically we're going to do whatever we want, and there's nothing you can do to us. It's a bully's message.
I said in my introduction that this actual anti-gay propaganda law affects you. You are a gay parent raising your children there. Are you going to stay, or are you going to leave before it comes into effect?
We're going to leave not before the propaganda law comes into effect. The propaganda law has been in effect since the beginning of July. But in February, another law is coming up for a vote in Parliament. This will allow social services to remove children from people who are known or believed to be homosexual. That affects our 3 kids, one of whom is already in the States because he's adopted and most vulnerable, and the other 2 are still in Moscow, and we're all going to leave at the end of the year before they pass this law, and they will pass the law.
So I guess the question is, what is going on? Obviously, there's been a huge amount of international pressure, particularly around the Olympics, people trying to, to have an impact on Russia regarding this law. Is it having any impact whatsoever, pressure from outside?
Well, it is in a way, and unfortunately, it is causing Russia to take an even more aggressive stand. It doesn't make the pressure wrong, to my mind. But I think, again, if you think of it as dealing with a bully in the street or in a schoolyard, this is the kind of reaction you're going to get. I mean, Putin is acting like a cornered animal, or again, like a bully who is being confronted. He's lashing out. His government is doing more and more absurd things. Again, I mean, on the one hand, the arrest of the 30 people who are on Arctic Sunrise, which is the ship that was seized. On the one hand, it's outrageous. It's not like anything we have seen in recent years. But on the other hand, it is part and parcel of the larger crackdown that's been going on in Russia for at least the last year and a half, which is affecting anybody who's perceived as an outsider, and which is colored by this very, very strong and articulated anti-Western rhetoric.
How do you make, or what do you make of the fact that a sizable number of Russians actually take pride in what Putin is doing, particularly in this regard? And they believe that he's, he's saving the nation from some kind of corruption. What does he think, and how does he think the nation can be damaged without putting this anti-propaganda law in place?
Well, first of all, those figures are not particularly reliable. They're not particularly reliable for a number of reasons, which most of them are a little too involved to go into. But basically, opinion polling in authoritarian societies is notoriously unreliable. People mouth back what they're being told on television, partly because they don't get any other messages, partly because they fear saying anything else. So I don't think that that's a really important thing to discuss. Does Putin have support in these policies? Of course he does. I mean, hate sells everywhere, and hate sells particularly well in countries where nothing else is on television, which is the situation that we've had in Russia for years.
So where do you see this going as the Olympics come up, as, the months and years progress? Where do you see the trend in terms of democracy, civil liberties going in Russia?
I'm not even sure those words are applicable at this point. Where do I see the trend in terms of the crackdown? The crackdown will continue. The crackdown will intensify. There's a possibility that just before the Olympics, they might accept some sort of grudging compromise just to make sure that the Olympics go off relatively smoothly. So it's possible that the Arctic 30 will benefit from it. It's possible that there will be several people released under an amnesty that's supposed to go into effect in December. These will be temporary measures. Again, this is, I'll go back to the bully analogy because I think it's extremely useful to understanding what's going on. If a bully is cornered, he might sort of throw the thing back at you and say, here, have it, I didn't want it in the first place. That doesn't stop his bullying. And that's what's happening in Russia. The crackdown will certainly continue. I think it will intensify after the Olympics. Whatever concessions they make before the Olympics, which may or may not occur, will be temporary.
Masha Gessen, thank you very much indeed for joining me from Moscow.